to start, this is a review of the Rise of Skywalker by the Kargo Kings. This is our first ever movie review, and we are all huge avid Star Wars fans. So I really like we really care about this, really invested. And we have probably had long hourly discussions about this movie 1,000 times. So it's good to finally put it out on the internet so that other people can hate this movie with us.
Yes.
I guess it's important to say that when the first time we went to go see this movie, we loved it and we thought it was awesome, like in the theater. But unanimously, the second time we went, we thought it was terrible. So, yeah, it's just whatever. So, we're going to start with pros and then we're going to have cons. And we have five of each, and then we'll give it a rating out of five. So, starting with pros is creativity. Out of this whole trilogy, the one of the main criticisms I've had is that it has not been creative. The original trilogy and the prequels were both super creative. This movie, every landscape is a desert. So for me, it was kind of cool to see an ice planet, a desert planet. You had the planet where they were with Poe and like the bounty hunters, and then they showed Mustafar. There was just a lot of different environments. Does anyone have a rebuttal for that?
No, I mean that sums it up pretty well. I mean, you
The
saw
only
a lot of
thing
different stuff.
is that on the desert planet, on the cool party planet that they were having, it was still just a desert.
Hmm.
Yeah, like even when they showed an actual, even when they tried to like be creative and showed like that cool like race of aliens on the planet having a cool like party or whatever, it was still just like in the Grand Canyon, like it looked like Earth.
Yeah.
Uh, but anyway, it was cool. So then that leads us to our next positive, which is Palpatine's Force lightning. Out of this entire trilogy, the two best moments for me personally is when Kylo Ren froze the laser on Jakku, and then going forward all the way to this one, ending it with Palpatine shooting lightning from his hands and literally eliminating an entire fleet was one of the coolest things to see on screen as a Star Wars fan.
Yes.
Hmm.
I don't think there's anything else to say about that, really.
No,
No, not
Um,
that
really.
was definitely the most hype moment of the
Yeah,
whole trilogy.
we literally screamed in the
I was
theater.
very excited when he shot that lighting up in the sky and
Just that straight bass boost.
yeah, nuked the entire rebel fleet.
Then within the same spirit that that scene had, the next pro that we have is the opening scene with Kylo. For me, that scene, like when that scene came on, I literally thought like this movie's gonna be so good, and I thought it again the second time I watched it, but it all fell short. But just I think the reason why it was so good, it was just a promising scene. You had Palpatine, you had Kylo, and the way Palpatine was talking, it gave you a very like prequel esque vibe. Like it was just like the most immense thing. I know these aren't very like it's not a very like critically it's kind of an emotional argument, but really it honestly made me emotional.
Yeah, I think the movie as a whole had a lot of fan service. You know, you hear a lot of similar lines that Palpatine says. Um, Almost everything except the tragedy of Darth Plagueis. You see her callback to almost.
Hmm.
Yeah, what did he say?
That
What was that line?
He said,
the dark side
"Path to
is
dark,
a
yeah,
pathway to what was the
many
exact line?
abilities which some consider to be unnatural."
Natural.
Unnatural.
Yes. So seeing, I mean, we all knew, by the time we were watching the movie that Palpatine was going to come back, but I still really like that opening scene. Kind of seeing these two, one was a rising villain in the sequel trilogy, who we all knew was going to eventually be the main villain in the sequel trilogy, just immediately get one upped by the main villain from the last, six movies. So it was really cool to see those two characters kind of meet up and how they interacted, and kind of how Palpatine still managed to take control.
Yeah. The only thing I wish is that it was longer.
Hmm.
They could have. I wish they would have seen more with Kylo and finding the Wayfinders and stuff, whatever they're called.
Yeah,
Um,
and you also mentioned earlier that um,
it would have been much more interesting, I think.
the character dynamic of like for Kylo finding out that like his relationship with Darth Vader through the Force, and then also with
Yeah, his grandfather.
yeah, and also with Snoke, the
Snoke.
whole thing was fabricated. So
Mhm.
finding out that these close relationships were completely fabricated could have been a cool story arc that of course they didn't even think about or even try to explore.
In the end, it was just like a 2 minute amazing scene that I wish would have been longer.
Mm.
And that brings us to the next positive, which is Adam Driver. Adam Driver was like a lot of I see a lot of memes that say Adam Driver was like the best part of the trilogy, and that's pretty much hands down true. And I think it comes down to is just relatability. He is whinier, but he actually has emotional like there's some sort of moral dilemmas to his character.
Yeah, a lot of people complain about Ray being a Mary Sue, a two-dimensional Mary Sue, and yeah, I think Kylo Ren was the best character with the best emotional, like you said, emotional and moral dilemmas within trying to kind of fight between his family and what his family wants, and between all the kind of bridges that he burned down, in
Yeah.
his pursuit to become the ultimate Sith Lord. You
You
know.
know, I was kind of thinking about this. I kind of wish that they would have made him the main character of the entire trilogy. Like, it would have been cool to see from like just like a bad guy perspective of everything
Yeah,
the entire time, because he was the most interesting character out of everybody.
that
Yeah.
He
would
was
be
the
cool.
Side note on that, that's actually been one of the most annoying parts of Star Wars so far is because it seems like they want to keep promising that they're going to show us things from the Empire perspective, and then they never do. Like in Battlefront 2, they had the whole um, they had the whole campaign with what was her name, Iden Versio, and the whole thing was supposed to be like you get to play it as like the
an
Empire,
Imperial
and
troop.
then literally with after an hour of gameplay, you're on the Rebels again.
You're on the Rebels.
It's annoying. It's really annoying. They can't commit to it. Um, and then I guess to go to our next point under our next pro is the flashback fight between Luke and Leia, and I think the reason this is good is because the fights in this whole trilogy have been atrocious. And this was probably a 15-second scene, which actually goes to show you how bad this movie is considering this is on our top 5 list. A 15-second scene made the list.
Also, a 2 minute scene of the opening.
Yeah.
Literally every single fight in this movie after the bar was set by the prequels for what people expect from a Star Wars movie, the best fight we got was a 15-second fight between Luke and Leia. Like, that was CGI'd. Like, it wasn't even a real fight. And it's just sad. Like, it was creative. We'll give it that. It was creative. You had two iconic characters. It gave you more insight into what Leia was like. Everything good about Star Wars was in that scene, and then it ended. And I don't even know what was that scene. What was going on in that scene? Why did they even show that?
I honestly don't remember.
It was
Actually,
showing that Leia had her own lightsaber. Pretty much, Leia had
yeah,
her own lightsaber, and that Luke was training Leia. And I don't remember the reason why Leia was decided not to be trained anymore.
because she was having Ben.
Was that it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So, like, it just like, I mean, it was already confirmed that she was force sensitive, even from Episode 6.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it also shows, which I really like that. It shows that she was actually, being trained to be a Jedi at one point. Because I always thought that didn't make any sense as to why she was force sensitive and then just didn't do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
No, I
so I
agree.
don't know. That's why I like that scene.
Okay, so and that's
Well, I
pretty much
remember
all.
Yoda in the original trilogy always talking. He said like, I, rem- I don't know where I remember this from, but he said like that Leia was more powerful than Luke probably. Because I remember when, because she was basically Luke, but without any of like the whininess.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And so like, um, I feel like in a different world where Leia would have went to Dagobah and trained, she wouldn't have left. When everybody was in trouble on Bespin and stuff.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I think Yoda thought she had more like the will to be a Jedi.
Yeah, and I don't know. So that's pretty much all the pros we got really for this movie. It was creative, and there was some cool scenes,
It's good fan
and
service.
Adam Driver was a decent. He's a decent actor with who they actually tried to like make. I don't know. They get to like, try to give him something, honestly. So now with cons. So the first thing we'd like to talk about, we got to start at the beginning here. Inconsistencies with the whole trilogy. So the first thing that comes to mind is J.J. Abrams setting up story arcs in the beginning of the trilogy that didn't end like like even
No
remotely to
payoffs
where
at
you
all.
thought.
There's no payoffs. Right?
You can start with like who were Rey's parents, who's Snoke. You have Finn
Where
as a what's it called? Finn as a trooper, and then coming out. Like you just have different. And in fact, I don't even really know where to start. I guess most importantly, Rey. So first of all, you set up a character in The Force Awakens that doesn't really make any sense for her to be anyone. You know, like okay, well, who is she? This whole trilogy is about the Skywalker. It doesn't really make any sense for her to be Luke's daughter because then, like, where did she come from? Like, when did Luke have a daughter? And like, who is, there's a whole another set of things you need to explain. And if that's the case, like she has a mom, then like her mom should show up in this trilogy, right? So that's the first thing. Then the second thing is like, if it's gonna be like, I don't know, it like what was it, Obi-Wan's daughter, then you also have to have some sort of explanation for that. And if you go down the line of like any major characters in Star Wars who might have had a daughter, it doesn't there's no real explanation for who the parent might be, like who the wife would be. And just in general, like it's just not a feasible thing for there to be a new character outside of a Skywalker in this trilogy. So then I think Ryan Johnson, as bad as The Last Jedi is, had kind of a good idea of making her a nobody, where it's like, okay, she's a nobody. Like, we can do whatever we want with this character, and at least it makes sense, At least we can kind of adopt her into the scene. And then JJ went and made her a Palpatine, which I honestly don't think that was planned at all. It just doesn't really make any sense, and it's just kind of inconsistent with the whole trilogy.
there just wasn't a coherent like you can tell they didn't have a plan from the beginning, or maybe they did, but Ryan Johnson threw it out the window. I don't know. And
I
then
I don't even
JJ,
really I don't even want to blame Ryan Johnson necessarily because I personally think like JJ just set it up wrong. He put,
yeah, I agree.
you know what I mean? Like he set it up to where you have like he started the timeline at episode 4, A New Hope. Like he started at the same place, but like after
Yeah,
episode 6, the good guys were winning, but now all of a sudden the good guys are losing, and all of a sudden there's like you have all these different new enemies and people. Like you don't know who the guy. Like even in the very first scene, um, there's a guy who gives Poe Dameron a map, and you learn about
who's
the
that guy?
Resistance, the map, this guy, and like Luke Skywalker ran away, and it's like, who's this guy? How did he? How did he get this map? How did Luke make the map? Who's the Resistance? And who's the First Order? And none of those things get explained in the entire trilogy. Really. I mean, even like the fact the essence of the First Order that gets explained outside the trilogy, but that I don't want to go too far off topic of like this movie. But my main point is that the movies were all set up wrong. So then you have these inconsistencies in the Rise of Skywalker now, where okay, now we're just making stuff up. Ray's granddad is Emperor Palpatine. Finn, he's force sensitive, but he like we're not gonna use it. And Hux, he's actually a traitor now. You know what I mean? It's just not consistent.
The writers, I feel like, just didn't have any vision throughout the whole thing.
Even
Like
Rose,
consistent vision.
because they tried to set up like a love triangle, and that just didn't work at all. Like nobody wanted it. So then they ended with not have like why wouldn't like why would Ryan Johnson even introduce Rose when you could just have Ray and Finn fall in love, unless you were just trying to show her being Mary Sue who doesn't need a lover. But then if that's the case, then why'd you have her fall in love with Kylo? Which is a whole nother thing that we'll talk about later. I don't know. Do we have any other things to say about inconsistencies? Because this is like our smallest point.
Yeah. No, I don't have anything else. I pretty much
There's
got it
a
all.
lot of inconsistencies that would be.
Mhm.
We could nitpick forever.
The next thing is no risk. And this is the one thing, the first time we watched the movie, we noticed this. This is the one thing that we noticed right off the bat. It's all started, like, the whole movie was honestly kind of good up until you have the scene where Rey comes in with the Knights of Ren and freaking Chewbacca's in the ship and it's flying away. And Rey blows it up
Glass and shit.
with electricity. It was honestly so sick.
Yeah.
it
And
was.
it honestly, the other cool thing about it was, for once you had them like bantering and you had the characters interacting. There was character development going on. I'm not saying it was perfect, but like there was character development. Then there was consequence. There was an action that happened, and you had a consequence, like a real consequence. Like you showed Chewbacca and Rey coming close together. They showing a friendship. Then you have Rey's actions lead to Chewbacca dying. And it was honestly kind of a sick death. It's not like the honorable death that Chewbacca deserves necessarily, but it's something to say like this is the consequence for her actions, and you have no idea where this trilogy, like this movie's going. Like it could have gone anywhere from there. And then 5 minutes later, he's still alive.
Yeah.
Like all the potential is gone. All the potential is gone. And then I don't know how much later into the movie it was, but then they did the same thing with C-3PO, because they have this whole scene where they're like, we're risking it all for C-3PO. Like he's gonna die. He's gonna risk his life to save us all. And then they have that cheesy scene where he's like, I'm taking one last look at my friends. And then it not only was it not the last look at his friends, who really weren't even his friends, like they weren't his friends, and then he just comes back. He just comes back later. Like there was no consequence. All of the talk, all of like the emotional, like trying to get you invested in the character,
Mm-hmm.
it's for nothing. It's for nothing. There's no real consequence. And if there's no real consequence and the decisions don't, then the decisions that your characters don't really matter. And if your
Yeah.
characters don't matter, then they can't, like, that takes away what makes characters more real.
My biggest problem with the C-3PO is they literally said in the movie C-3PO made a line saying, "Not even R2-D2 has my memory backup," because the whole thing was they would have to wipe C-3PO's memory so they can interpret the Sith dialogue transmission.
Yeah.
That was the whole thing, and C-3PO even said like, "Not even R2-D2 has my memory backup."
I think they specifically worded it as I don't think that he has a
I
backup.
don't think R2. Isn't
Yeah.
R2D2 literally the one that brings back his memory?
Yeah.
Yeah, he is. At the end of the movie, C-3PO is like, "Oh, hello, I'm C-3PO, human cyborg relations," and then R2-D2 like, you know, gives him his
Fuck him or
memory
whatever.
back, and that's like at the end of the movie. So that was for nothing. There was
Also,
no sacrifice at the end.
yeah, another thing that is weird to me, that I won't talk about for long, but like Anakin built C-3PO, right?
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Why would Anakin program C-3PO to not speak a Sith language, a slave boy that doesn't know anything about the Sith that have
Right.
been
Oh,
dead for thousands of years?
you could say because he was reprogrammed by I don't know,
Oh,
like by
it was
Padme or by Princess
Bail
Leia,
Organa, I thought.
Bail
I think
Organa.
at the end of episode 3, Bail Organa says to wipe the memory of R2-D2 and C-3PO. And there's a good chance they were probably reprogrammed then as well.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but
Well,
yeah.
What is I like? I thought the whole point was that nobody knew what the Sith language was. So how I don't know. I just don't get how they would know.
it's also one of the. It's just one of those things. I feel like with J.J. Abrams is just you kind of like put this thing out there, and then you don't really understand it. We kind of have. I kind of have more to say about that later, but what I'm getting at is that he's introducing a concept without to like carry the plot forward, but there's not really any depth of thought there. It's just kind of like,
Yeah, it was
and this,
literally just to push the plot forward.
yeah, and going forward with fake deaths, at the very end, I think did Kylo die twice and then Ray
The
died?
triple death fake out. Yeah.
Yeah.
like like I don't remember the scene. I can honestly say I do not remember the scene well enough to say
Oh, I remember it.
uh,
Palpatine. Well, first of all, Ben and Ray were about to fight Palpatine together. They did that cool thing where they both like pulled up their lightsabers, but immediately Ben got force pushed off into like off a cliff,
okay.
and then he comes back up, and then Ray like used all of her energy or whatever, all the Jedi, whatever, died. Ben, well, I forgot this earlier in the movie. Ray stabs Ben, right?
Right. Oh
While
yeah,
he
yeah, yeah.
while he
That's a
noticed
good
Ben
point. And then
not
that
die.
was a big no risk taken because the whole point was like she killed him. Like, oh shoot, she killed him.
Yeah, that would have been crazy if he
Like
stayed
that
dead.
right. And then oh nope, force heal. And then that introduces the whole plot hole. And a lot of people have gotten to this, so I won't get into it too much. But like if Ray, who has minimum training, I don't care what anyone says. She is minimally trained. She wasn't trained in the Jedi like breaking temple. I know she had the books, but it's not like you read it and you can just do it. You have to train for years.
Hmm.
Point is, there have been a lot of Jedi who could have used this, including Anakin on Padme to save her life. Like if this was not it's not like she literally raised him from the dead. She stabbed him and like all the way
He was
through.
dead.
Like
Yeah.
he should have been dead. Like it didn't. But fine, whatever. She can heal him now after a full fight too. Not to mention, because part of the whole idea with the Force is if you're too weak and too tired, you can't use powerful abilities. Like Yoda, 800-year-old Yoda was struggling to hold up a giant pillar. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now she's just like, oh, let me just heal this real quick.
Let me just bring him back from the dead.
And then going back forward, like you said,
Yes. So Ray died. He used all of her energy or whatever. Kylo used Force Heal, which I don't know how he knew how to use.
yeah, how
But
did he use force heal? Oh my god.
and then he died. But I'm not really like why couldn't Ray just bring him back to life too? Like I feel like that could just be a constant thing.
The
Yeah.
other thing too, I would like to mention right now is the whole movie was kind of building this idea that they're a triad in the Force, like their powers work together. So it was supposed to be like this thing of dark side and light side come together to defeat true evil. And then that was just thrown out the window because they just tossed him off the ledge of a cliff.
The cliff, yeah.
Like it's not even. They're
It's
not
almost,
even.
they just kind of forgot their themes the entire movie. Like they just kind of threw their themes out the window that they set up. They were wanting.
Well, and so then that scene goes through, um, and I would like to move on from the fake deaths because we could talk about that. We could probably talk about that a lot longer. But then you have the next thing I have thought about is for no risk is they didn't show the Force Ghost. They had the scene where she was talking. It's like everybody wanted cameos, right? You know what I mean? Like you gave us all this fan service, but then the one thing people asked for, which is like Hayden Christensen ghosts and
Ewan McGregor
Obi,
goes.
yeah, Ewan McGregor ghosts, and like all the different Force ghosts. I know that stuff can be like a little sketchy, but then you just didn't do it at all. Like you didn't show any of them. You didn't
I
even
think
try.
like you got their voices, so obviously they were there, at least recording. So why not just make it like they don't even have to be there at the same time, you know?
I know. Just,
It literally would have been like the voices were cool when I first heard them, but it just felt so like empty the second time. It's like you're just waiting for them to show up behind her.
I know.
It never happens.
In fact, there were so many times where I was excited and then nothing happened. But we'll get into that later because we have another point on missed opportunities, which is actually next. So, actually leads perfectly into the next point:
The fun fight.
missed opportunities, the final fight. Now, I like my friends. You know, we grew up on the prequels. We like prequels. The prequel fights were insane. The one thing that's kind of uncontested about the prequels is the fights. If you don't like the acting, you don't like anything else. The one thing you can't say is like, well, at least the fights are good. Now we've been waiting this whole trilogy for the fight, for the crazy lightsaber fight. In Force Awakens, it didn't happen. Last Jedi, they didn't even have a lightsaber on lightsaber fight at all. And then this movie, we get to the climax. We're so excited. It's so exciting. They're literally like teasing us with really cool things. You have the Knights of Ren, which we'll get into later. We have like the whole scene with Palpatine in the beginning, and we have the cool lightsaber scene with Luke and Leia. You have like a bunch of cool things coming up. You get to the very end. This is my biggest beef is that you have a giant arena full of Sith ghosts, like dead Sith. You have an arena full of dead Sith. Like, literally, an army of Sith. I know they're ghosts, but there's so many things you could do with that. And then you have Rey and you have Kylo. Rey is in this situation where she's being backed by all of the Force Ghosts, all of the good Force Ghosts, all of the old Jedi, all of them. She even had the line, "Look, 1,000 Jedi live in me." At one point, they played, I think, the opening part of Duel of the Fates, and I thought it was going to happen. What I thought was going to happen was I thought, kind of like SWOTAR style, all of the Sith in the arena, red lightsabers, go up everywhere, right? In the dark. You see all these red lightsabers. Boom. They're about to kill her. You have like 100 Sith surrounding this one person, her and Kylo, whatever one. They're about to and right before they're about to dive in, boom, 1,000 Force Jedi come in there, just like in Episode 2, in the Colosseum. You have all these Jedi in the center now, like Force Ghosts, come out, and now they have lightsabers. Then they rush it. Then Duel of the Fates plays. The Sith rush in, and they have the coolest fight you could have ever asked for. And then I don't know where it goes from there, but it somehow ends with a one-on-one with Palpatine, and ending the whole trilogy essentially. It would have been so insane. It would have been so cool. All anyone's ever asked for, any real Star Wars fan at this point has asked for, is a bunch of Jedi fighting a bunch of Sith. You had the opportunity, and it's gone.
What did we get? We got Ray making an X with two lightsabers.
Yeah. Not only did they,
They literally teased us. They literally teased us. She picked up the other lightsaber, and then she didn't do anything with it.
she
And that
literally
was
did the same thing that freaking Mace Windu did. Like, what are you like? It's not creative. Mace Windu died. Mace Windu died when he did that move. It doesn't work. And then all of a sudden it works for her because she had two lightsabers. I don't understand. Especially when he literally used his force lightning to take out an entire fleet. She had two lightsabers, man. Like it's not. It's just not as cool. It's just not as cool. It's the biggest disappointment ever. I'm not necessarily saying that my scene is the perfect scene ever, but I'm saying that there's so many things you could have done with that. Like I am just a 21-year-old college kid who does not make very much money, and I do not have any like experience with filmmaking really, not that much. And I feel like my idea is 1,000 times better than what these people are being paid millions of dollars to create. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. And then I don't know. The whole thing is just it's just not it just lays flat. And I think when we left the theater, we felt that. A lot of people around us were not excited. They didn't care. And it's just sad.
yes.
So I guess that's the first missed opportunity. That's the biggest one. The next one is Finn never using the Force. Kind of already talked about this, but it's just like you have Finn. The whole trilogy, he was kind of a missed opportunity. Finn started out as a really cool character. Like he was a stormtrooper who turned to the good side. What's gonna turn him to the like? What could have possibly turned him to the good side? Right? What could have like what? How is him being a stormtrooper gonna help? Like how what new things are we gonna learn about stormtroopers? What like how is he gonna relate to other stormtroopers? How is this gonna affect him? And you can just go down the list. Like, or is he gonna be a Jedi? You know, you have all these questions about him. Every single one of them fell flat. Not only did he not did him being a stormtrooper not affect his character at all, but then they didn't end up giving his backstory. They didn't explain it at all. They didn't explain why he I think even in this movie they were just like, we don't know why. We just did. We just when he's talking to that girl. We just woke up one day and we realized that the First Order's awful. Like that makes any sense. And then they didn't use his Force abilities at all. Not even a little bit. And they don't have any plans on continuing the character. So it's like Disney's literally like EA of movies. Like they're just making us pay for extra content to know what happened to the characters that they didn't bother explaining in the multi-million-dollar films that they made. It doesn't. It's just disgusting.
It's just lazy.
And then my last gripe is they actually use C-3PO in this movie, which is very awesome, but they didn't use R2-D2. I don't understand why. Like you have two characters, R2-D2, C-3PO, who are a great character dynamic, and they just didn't use them all trilogy. Instead, they added BB-8 to sell toys. They didn't make BB-8 interesting at all. He was good. He was okay for the first couple minutes, and then he just didn't go anywhere. The C-3PO and R2-D2 are a dynasty in Star Wars. They're in every single Star Wars film, but for some reason in this whole trilogy, they just let them lay flat. I don't know if anyone else has anything to say about that.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, so our next point is the final act. Now, we've already mentioned our gripes with the final fight, but as a whole, personally, there's just some things that just don't make any sense. Lando and the fleet coming in last minute. I don't know how long he had, a week, a day, maybe even a month. But no, ridiculous. No matter how long this time span, unless he had honestly years The idea of getting the entire galaxy's individual fleets to come to this one unknown location to fight an unknown, like an unconfirmed fleet, like something they didn't even know was there. Lando, too, who like most, I don't even think he had any credibility to do this. The idea of getting this many ships to fight the fleet made no sense, and it just doesn't logistically make sense. And then on top of that, you have a completely unorganized, spur of the moment fleet versus a fleet that has been being prepared for like what 100 years or something like that. Like, there's no chance, no contest. It doesn't. There's no contest. The Sith troopers should have won that. That like, it didn't make any sense. And then you go to the next point where the Sith fleet, like their whole launch pattern is attached to one ship, like one beacon. And yeah, they can switch the beacon, but that's not how it works in real life or in Star Wars. Like, no, they don't depend on one ship's launch patterns for the entire fleet to launch. They can all launch individually. There's no reason they should need one ship satellite to be on. So it's like they're just creating a Death Star like ventil like heat vent scenario. They're just creating one out of thin air because they've wrote themselves into a hole. They've like literally wanted this huge fleet, and there's no way for for this fleet to be destroyed that makes sense. So they just have to create one out of their own butts. Like, it's stupid.
Yeah.
But
Uh, and then, if you guys have anything to say about that, I don't know.
yeah, I think overall the writing is just like they just didn't think enough through what they were writing. Obviously, throughout the entire trilogy, they didn't really have a plan. They didn't really like think it all the way through. So like it seems just always seemed like halfway through they were like, oh well, we want to have this set piece, we want to have this happen, but we didn't really have a way to get there that made sense. So we're just still gonna do it, but we're just gonna make a loophole
It,
to still make it happen.
and it's sad and it's lazy because these are literally the greatest writers. These are the greatest writers on the planet. Like, these are people who get paid millions of dollars to write, and there is no excuse. Just take some time, you know. Like, be careful. Take a while to write it. I don't know. Like, I don't know what to ask. Like, what? Why is it so hard not to write yourself into a hole? Like, just stop. Like, if you're a fan of Star Wars, it's not hard to come up with cool Star Wars stories. Yet, the people in charge of it seem to not be a big enough fan of Star Wars to come up with anything like that's remotely interesting. It's ridiculous. And I guess that kind of brings me to my last point about this, which is the llamas riding on the ship. This isn't really like a huge complaint, but you just kind of landed a bunch of llamas on the ship, and they just rode them in the battle like battle horses. And then, of course, they had to get off of the llamas because
As soon as they cut off of the llamas, they just started getting destroyed.
and it doesn't make any sense because, like, couldn't they just have had a TIE fighter come in and shoot them? Like, why did they need... I understand, like, you don't want to damage the ship. I don't know. There's just so many ways they could have dealt with it other than just being like, oh, shoot. Like, we better land a bunch of troops on the side of the ship to, like, defend them in a ground battle.
I never did think about that. Like, they wanted to have like, that's just another thing. They wanted to have a set piece. They wanted to have people fight on the top of a Death Star, or not the Death Star, on the top of a Star Destroyer. But they're like, no, they won't think about it that much. Like, they think we're stupid or something.
And I don't know. Honestly, the whole thing is just stupid. Like, it doesn't make any... Like, again, this whole trilogy, I think you could summarize it with saying it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't. Like, they didn't... Nothing was thought through. So, overall, like, with these three, I guess with those 4 points, it brings us to the final point, which is if this is overall just a bad trilogy, and this was a bad ending to a bad trilogy to a great saga. Literally, just took the whole saga that was great, and then just bad trilogy, bad bad ending. Um, Earlier we mentioned how there's been inconsistent themes, and the one thing like the way they ended the movie was Ray looking into like the sunset, saying her name was Ray Skywalker, and that doesn't make any sense. One of you
Uh,
guys can talk about that.
yeah.
It's kind of cringe.
It is kind of cringe, bro. So basically, the whole theme of this movie, from what I gathered watching, was that you it doesn't really matter where you came from, is what they're saying. You can kind of like make your own path and make your own destiny, make your own like name. So they made, I feel like they tried to make her, or they did make her a Palpatine because they wanted to like express that in a way, and they tried to stick to that the whole film. I'd say they did make her struggle a little bit with like finding out she has a lot of dark side tendencies and stuff. But then they made her a Jedi at the end, which was their point. But then at the end, instead of changing, like not being afraid of your past and kind of embracing who you are and changing what you can change, instead of embracing that at the end, she just said her name was Bray Skywalker instead of saying her name was Bray Palpatine.
It's so dumb, especially when they had the clear opportunity to make her the daughter of Luke Skywalker. Like it makes just as much sense as making her the daughter of Palpatine, and you just didn't do it. Just like you just made her it. And one of the things I forgot to mention earlier was Rey had some cool dark side scenes. She shot lightning out of her fingers, destroyed the ship. She had the cool double sided lightsaber. What the heck was all that? Like, I feel
Yeah.
like you have all these like weird moments where they're trying to like express something, and then it just falls short. Like, I don't even think she really didn't struggle with, you know,
Yeah, no, she was
Palpatine
just
at
kind of
the
like,
end.
well, she was just kind of mad the whole movie for no reason.
It's like, you know, I don't know who struggles more. It's like, me running the mile in ninth grade or Ray through this entire trilogy.
I feel like there's the whole scene. This is another missed opportunity point I'm making. There was the whole scene where like Palpatine's like, "Where am I? Like, sit in my throne or where my crown or whatever the frick it was," and you will become like the most powerful Sith ever. Both of our like spirits will combine and be the strongest Sith ever. And then I was like, "Come on, Ray, sit in the seat, sit in the seat. It's gonna
Yeah.
be so awesome." And she doesn't freaking sit. I don't know. She just kills him. It's annoying.
It would have been so much better. Can you imagine if instead of force pushing Ben off the side of the cliff, he comes in and like I don't know, they fight or something. He tries to bring her back. Like she was trying to bring him back the entire trilogy, right? She was trying to bring him back to the light side. It would have been like really poetic if in the end he was the one trying to bring her back to the light side.
Yeah.
Or just kill her. That would have been nice too. If she went to the
Yeah,
dark
that's
side
what
and
I'm
he had to
saying.
kill.
Like there's
Like
so many different ways you could have done. Like they could have fought. They could have had a poetic thing where he ends up trying to bring her back. He
they
fights.
they could have even had Ray, because Ray and Kylo had this whole like relationship build up, right? So they're like getting close to each other, right? They're kind of having like this whole thing where they're like coming close, which wasn't really a romance. First of all, like I know they kind of, but we'll talk about that later. Point is, the main thing is that they were getting close. Like there was a a relationship being built. What it would have done to my heart to see these people who are grew in friendship, like they're coming closer together. Ray watching Rey and Kylo fight, and then Kylo having to kill her after all that, after she brought him to the light, showed him the truth, and then watching her fall, and then it's like that's like watching your youth pastor get divorced. Like
Yeah.
it's literally like just watching the person you look like someone you look up to. It's such a relatable experience, and they couldn't commit to it. Like they didn't think it all of it through. It just again
They couldn't have their perfect like protagonist have any moral dilemma.
flaws or
Any
just
flaws.
flaws.
Like they don't. They just didn't understand that that's what makes a character interesting, and then that's what makes people want to watch that character and root for that character. But instead, like literally, the entire saga before this was about Darth Vader, like literally the most flawed protagonist ever. He was the main character of
Mm-hmm.
all 6 movies, and like, why does everybody love Darth Vader so much? Because he's literally the most flawed character and protagonist
I know
ever.
people relate to, like as a little kid when someone asks, "Do you want to be a Sith or a Jedi?" Every little kid says Sith because Sith are awesome because they kill people and have awesome powers and they're strong, just like Darth Vader. You know what I mean? Like it's fun to be like an edgy teenager. You know what I mean? And that's kind of like why we like Kylo, and that's why it's kind of cool that Kylo got redeemed. You know, you can see that you can struggle through it, but Rey literally had not a single weakness. Like she couldn't really develop a relationship with Finn. The whole time she was like friend zoning him, right? And it's not because they didn't want them to be together. It's because they wanted to show that she was a strong female who like doesn't need a man. And, like the whole time they're just trying to show her as a kind of like woman who's strong and doesn't need any help and blah 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 blah, just going down the lines. And it's just not a real character. It's just not a real character. It's not a real person. That character doesn't exist. People need help, and people have weakness, and people have attachments to each other. And Rey did not experience any of those in this whole trilogy.
Hmm.
Like, just the premise of her character, like looking for her parents. Like, think about that. Think about that. The whole time she was like looking for her parents, right? Like she wanted to be with her parents, her family. She wanted her family. She finds out who her family is. The perfect way to show that her weakness, her like main struggle, that being that she wants to be with her family, her succumbing to that and joining Palpatine as her grandfather because she want like having that arc, that completely wasted because instead you just wanted to show that she's a flawless human being who never makes mistakes more than a couple seconds.
Yeah, I mean, like that would have been so perfect. Like she's been searching for her family the whole time, and she finally found it, which in Palpatine. And why would she not take it? I mean, like she spent the whole movie basically being on the dark side anyway. Like she was just mad the entire time, and like she never really learned any Jedi values. So why would she not? You know what I mean? Other than, I mean, what was even Palpatine's plan? Is he just gonna go rule the galaxy? Like I don't.
What's
What was the
the
plan? What was that? He's just sending a bunch of ships into the sky.
I think Palpatine's plan was to like take over Rey's body and like pretty much become like have like a new body, I guess. I don't know. Become even more powerful.
the
But I mean, what
overlord of the
about the ships?
galaxy?
Was he gonna try to like rule the galaxy again, or what?
Yeah, I guess so. There's just a lot. Like, you know, it would have been a way cooler movie if they would have set this movie. Like, this movie would have been the beginning, and then they showed us a trilogy of how the New Republic and this entire race of Jedi have to fight off Palpatine's fleet and force like Palpatine with his unlimited power and just a army of ghost Sith. That would have been sick. That would have been a sick trilogy. That would have been awesome. And instead, that's the opposite of what we got. We got a worse, awful trilogy. Like, I don't know. It's, but I think that should be all that we say about the Rey Skywalker remark. Because we have a couple things to say about unfinished story arcs. Finn never told Ray what he was thinking. I know that they J.J. Abrams came out and said what he was thinking later. I think he said, what was he saying? That he had the Force.
He
What
either had
was,
the Force or that he loved her. We don't know. I
it
don't know.
was retconned. It was retconned, which is another issue, because then you have issues where they come out and they start telling us things about the movie that we didn't know. Like, for example, like Palpatine was a clone. Like what? Like,
Why don't they just explain it in the film? Right?
yeah, I think in the film it was implied that they were using dark magic to bring him back to life, not that he was a clone. Like you didn't say that he was a clone. Like it's very you're getting lost. Like just say what he is, okay? Um, Next you have things with Rose, right? Like they set the whole thing up in Last Jedi. I didn't like Rose. I'm glad she wasn't in this, but it is something to say that they set it up as a love triangle that just never came to fruition, and now she's just like friend zoned by Finn. It doesn't. I don't know what you're doing. Then you have Hux. And interrupt me at any moment. You have something to say. But then there's Hux, who in the first movie was kind of a good villain, like the Grand Moff Tarkin replacement. And then instead of the Grand Moff Tarkin replacement in the Last Jedi, he ended up being comic relief. And in this movie, he's just dead. Like he's just a traitor, and then he dies. Like,
Yeah.
what a waste of a character. Then there's Phasma, also a waste of a character. You have like you're literally trying to set up the female Boba Fett, like the coolest character ever. And so first of all, I think the impression that Phasma left on us was not kind of like a metallic Boba Fett. It was more like a kind of like a Ellen DeGeneres, but taller. Is kind of how I felt about Phasma. Just felt very I don't know. She just like I don't know. She just wasn't very threatening
Can you
at
imagine
all.
it was Ellen DeGeneres inside that suit?
Like I can just imagine the woman who is like I know who is playing her. I forgot what her
Yeah.
name was. Wasn't she? I think she was in Game of Thrones.
She's in Game of Thrones.
But she's just like a tall, skinny woman. It's just not really the build for like a terrifying like hunter. And then I was looking forward to being proved wrong, right? Showing her do some bad A stuff, but she didn't do any bad A things. She didn't. She just died twice.
Yeah.
And then of course she's not in this one.
Yeah.
The next point I have is the knife wayfinder clue, which is ridiculous. In this scene, they go to the Death Star and she just holds up this dagger and she like pulls the side out, and it just so happened to line up perfectly with the Death Star from where she's standing. Like, what on earth is that? First of all, that's such a big coincidence. Because if she would have stood anywhere else on the island, it wouldn't have matched up. Number one. Number two, what? Or never mind. But number two, what kind of
How
clue
many
is
of
that?
Yeah. How many of the Death Star pieces like not moved? I mean, it's a planet of water. That, like things would move and go on. But like,
It's
why
literally a
would it
wreck.
be in the exact same place for 30 plus years?
And what kind of clue is that? Who drew that? Like, why would they make that? Like, what were you thinking?
That
That's-
doesn't even like feel like Star Wars. You know what I mean?
It honestly reminded me of I was watching Super 8 the other day, and in Super 8, what I noticed is in Super 8's a pretty good movie as far as like character development goes, and like just the thrill of it. But what I notice is they have J.J. Abrams in that movie does a lot of things that he does in this movie. There's a lot of things that happen that are unexplained. Like in the beginning, a truck just crashes into a train, and the train obliterates, like literally destroys the entire train station.
Yeah.
Like, and there's flames everywhere, and there's bombs in the trains, and the truck is still there with the guy in it alive. And they're just kind of like, well, he's injured, and you know what I mean. So they just kind of like write themselves into a hole, right? Because they need him to be alive for the plot to continue, and then they kind of like take a map from him, and they're like, this is a clue. You know what I mean? It's like they're doing the same thing in this movie. You know, they J.J. Abrams wants a cool scene, like the llama scene, and then he just kind of has to be like, when explaining it, like why it makes sense, he has to be like, well, it makes sense because of this, and then we're not gonna talk about it. And then I think, I guess my main point, what I was trying to say is J.J. Abrams, I must just really like these kind of survival like stories, like the Goonies and stuff, because that's kind of how this scene, like how that's kind of how Super 8 feels, kind of like the Goonies. You know, they're coming across clues, trying to figure out the mystery, and that's how this scene felt. Like I was like, at this point, J.J. Abrams literally had absolutely no idea what to do, and he was just like, well, maybe there's a clue in the sword. And this whole movie honestly kind of had a Goonies vibe, now that I think about it, because of things like this. It was really just J.J. Abrams being weird.
What made her like pull out the knife at the time? Like, what made her notice that? I don't remember.
It overall was just a dumb clue, and it's honestly just, I think J.J. Abrams, I don't know, like it's just how he directs movies, and it's just bad.
He couldn't have just thought of a clever way. I don't know.
He did the same thing in Force Awakens with the map, the map to Skywalker.
Yeah, there's just a map.
How did they even make a map? Is my question. Like, what do you mean there's a map? Like, isn't he just? I don't know. I honestly can't, because they had like a line showing the direction that he was going into. I'm like, what the frick?
Luke Skywalker went to the one place where he would never be found.
Uh,
Immediately, there's a map to him with a straight line.
and then of course when they find the map, it's like, okay, well we don't have enough on the map. And then it's like, well, why don't we use R2D2? Well, he's not ready right now. He's asleep.
He's sleeping right now. He's asleep.
So, yeah, going from there, there's just a lot of different things in the movie that, like, or just in the trilogy in general, that were going places, and then they didn't go anywhere. And then the knife wayfinder clue, I think, is more of an example of inconsistency with like how the film is going. Like, it just kind of turned the whole movie into a Goonies treasure hunt, which is not a Star Wars plot at all. Like, it doesn't fit in, even with the other two movies in this trilogy. The next part I would like to point out is Leia's death. I don't know. I feel like Leia's death, number one, she got her son killed, which should have been actual. Again, her action should have had a consequence, but it didn't. The other thing too is, like, she honestly, it goes as a it kind of, you can kind of say this with all the characters, but she kind of died of failure. Like, she fought her whole life for the Republic, and then she died having no idea if that was gonna exist, and then she just kind of like got her son killed. I don't know. I don't really have that thought out as much as if anyone of you guys want to say something about it.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I don't know. She died to get her son's attention,
Yeah.
and then yeah, like you said, ended up getting her son killed, which ended up not meaning anything, which is kind of go back to our fake deaths, you know, get
Again.
stabbed in the tummy, and Ray just like, I don't know.
It felt short. It's not the worst thing ever. Like the way she died. Han's death is probably worse. Luke's death is probably worse. But again, it's just not the way you'd expect her to die at the end of this whole trilogy.
I guess you could see it as kind of a last attempt to bring her son back, but in the end, he literally died because she tried to do that.
Then you have Kylo Ren's death, which we kind of already talked about. It's just kind of unwarranted that Kylo Ren should die, because Kylo Ren the whole time was in a redemption arc. Like, it's the fallen the fallen hero is coming back home, and then he just got thrown out the window for a Mary Sue. It's like, well, why? The best character in the trilogy doesn't get any form of redemption, and if anything, that's the most poetic thing about this trilogy is that, like,
They did that on accident.
you're trying so hard in real life and it just goes to waste. It's true teenage angst. That's how you feel as a teenager. All your hard work's gonna go to nothing, and for some people it does. Honestly, that's what happened to Kylo Ren. Kind of sad. Then the last thing is Raylo, or not the last thing, but then there's Raylo, Ray and Kylo's relationship. Literally, I don't know if they attempted to do Raylo on purpose or if it was just because they saw all the girls on Tumblr who wanted it. And maybe like J.J. Abrams watched likes to watch like Star Wars hentai or something. Because it's really unwarranted. Like, there was no romance chemistry. And believe me, Ethan and I loved it. We love romance movies, and we love romance in Star Wars. We are from some of the few people who love Anakin and Padme, but it was bad. Like, they didn't build their relationship at all, and they should have. But they didn't, and because they didn't, the way they ended it was unwarranted, especially because he just died after. Like, she literally kissed him and then he died. Like, whoa, that kind of sucks. Like, and then she didn't cry about it, did she? I don't think she cried about it. I think
she immediately, 5 seconds later, I'm Ray Skywalker.
Yeah.
Also, why wasn't he standing there at the end with Luke and Leia?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that.
Why wasn't Anakin standing there? Why wasn't everybody standing there?
Everyone should have been.
They left room on the screen for everybody.
I know, yeah.
And they didn't bring them.
They were off center. They were on the left.
Imagine ending the trilogy with all of the heroes lined up, and then they just don't do it. The next thing is the Knights of Ren. You build up this idea of the Knights of Ren, and I guess this kind of goes with the unfinished story arcs idea. You put so much hype into the Knights of Ren. Knights of Ren are coming. They're gonna get in a cool fight. It's gonna be awesome. And then they just didn't do a freaking thing the whole time. They didn't do anything, and then he just killed them. And not only did Kylo Ren just kill all the Knights of Ren, they did it in a scene where like they tried to make it cool, but then they cut between every single move they did, so you couldn't watch any of it. It wasn't like the prequels where there was just uncut glory of just like.
The only cool thing that they didn't cut for when he did it was when Ben Solo jumped across the wherever they were fighting. Like, he just jumped over everybody and like body slammed one of them. But then maybe they did cut when he did that.
Honestly, I don't. At the end of the day, you can say the Knights of Ren are a disappointment. So
they just stood around like an emo boy band.
Overall, throughout this whole film, I mean, you have pros in the fact that it just wasn't it was better than the other ones, just more creative, and you had some cool scenes, and most of that was fan service. But then you just have these terrible cons, no risk, completely missed opportunities, a final act that just falls flat completely, and this just not a good ending to the trilogy. Left unfinished story arcs, left certain characters feeling flat. There's just so many. You just let so many things go. So I would say overall, for this movie, I would give it a 2 out of 5. 3 to 5 being like your completely average movie right in the middle. I'm gonna say 2 out of 5. Reason I don't give it a 1 out of 5 is because it's not. I think the reason I hate it so much is because it's a Star Wars film, and I love Star Wars, and I just care about it more. But I would say 2 out of 5.
I would also agree. I would say 2 out of 5.
I was gonna say 2 out of 5.
Yeah, just because mainly just the missed opportunities throughout the entire, not even just this, it was just a tease the entire time, and I feel like there was never any payoff to besides Palpatine shooting Force lightning into the sky.
Yeah.
That was worth seeing. But after like literally one thing that I can walk away satisfied with throughout 3 movies, like it just didn't.
I know. They probably put $1 billion into these movies or more, and there was one thing we liked about him. At the very end. At the very end
It
of the
was
movie.
literally 2 seconds.
And it was just fan service.
Mhm. That's honestly the only thing that like elevates this movie above the other two, as the fan service probably.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, well, thank you anybody, any like wanderers on the internet who came across this video, and to all my Cargo Kings friends who happened to watch like the entire thing. Thank you for watching, like and subscribe.
Comment your rating if you're watching. If you somehow made it this far, let us know what you think and if you disagree with us.
If you actually watched this whole movie, yes, absolutely.
I will give you $5.
But yeah,
They
so
probably.
this is Cargo King Reviews. Thank you for watching.
Bye bye.